I loved a lot of the science projects. I love the scientific method, and then testing hypotheses, and then writing reports. And then eventually I realized, oh, well, I'm actually a writer, not a scientist.
That was Arabella DeLucco, founder and CEO of WeXL, a nonprofit empowering diverse creators. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. In this podcast, Arabella traces her story back to Manila in the Philippines, where she was born and lived until she was 5. She then joined aunts and uncles in LA, and she really thrived. She loved school and immersed herself in it. When she moved from Southern California to New Jersey, it was a major shift, and she dove into her schoolwork even further, eventually being named valedictorian of her high school. During Arabella's time at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, she started spending time in New York City, first as a beer promoter, and then as a journalist. Check back Thursday for part 2 and the conclusion of Arabella's story, including how she wound up in San Francisco and started WeXL. Here's Arabella.
I am Filipino. I was born in the Philippines and in Manila, and I was raised by a village. So my family, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, they just are so much part of who I am as a person. And, you know, as much as I used to think growing up, oh, I wish I had this, or I wish I had that. I wish I was born in the United States. And, you know, it took me a while to understand that all of it is part of my story.
Right on.
And, you know, there's a point where I remember when I was a kid and I couldn't really speak English. And I was on the playground and I just vowed to myself that I would learn English with all my might. And I ended up, you know, learning English with all my might to a point where I think it has compromised my ability to speak Tagalog or Filipino.
And how old were you when you learned English?
I was 5 or 6. I mean, I was still very young, but I was a pretty bright kid. I could, you know, I took things very quickly. Took to things very quickly. But when I came to this country, I couldn't speak English, and I don't know why.
Oh, okay. So you learned English in the
in the United States, between the age, like in kindergarten, and I mean, I know people are thinking, well, you were so young, but still, I think about the reason why I remember it is because of this weird vow I made with myself
on the playground.
On the playground,
yeah.
And I don't know why I remember this. And maybe I just dreamt it up, made it up, who knows? But I remember and I feel that I had vowed to myself.
Yeah. And you made good on that vow.
I made good on that vow.
You were good to you in that instance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I accomplished it. I went on to study English literature and political science at Rutgers. And I loved my liberal arts background. And then from there, I became a newspaper reporter out of college, or during college. I worked for a Gannett Daily newspaper. I started off as an obituary clerk. Okay. Way back in 2000.
Where you write everyone who's still alive, you write their obituaries so they're ready to go?
Well, you know, I've always, this is why
They do that. I've worked with newspapers too.
Yeah,
they do that.
No, never.
It's so morbid.
It's so morbid. It is. And then I got a little morbid, but also got fascinated with the business of the funeral homes too. So I've always wanted to really talk to. I've always wanted to talk to a funeral home owner because it's usually a passed down business,
right?
And it's fascinating. It's one of those things that you are born into.
The stories that they must,
And it's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So that's how I started off in storytelling.
I want to hear more about your family before you were born. Do you know any of those stories of maybe how they ended up in Manila, or what was it about coming to the U.S.? Like what was your mom or parents' story there?
It's interesting. I wonder if in my quest for assimilation, I pretty much haven't had the opportunity to really go into my ancestors. It's very different for me as a Filipino American, trying to almost distance myself from the history that is the Philippines.
Right.
I've always said, I've heard it before, where they would tell me that I would never be an actor in the Philippines because I'm too dark. So, and colorism is a thing, and it's always made me really just, among other things about the Filipino culture, I've had to really come to terms with it because I judge it, and so the things in terms of my ancestors, like my grandparents. So my grandfather, in World War II, he, his family went to the mountains, and I remember writing about that in 4th grade or around that, maybe even earlier, and I still have that story. Yeah, it's
getting
4th
the
grade.
story directly from your grandparents?
Yes, from my grandfather who was alive at that time.
Right.
I believe it was probably a year before or the year of his death that I got this story, and I still have it.
Amazing.
And I can share with you this story.
Amazing.
I remember writing it all down on yellow legal paper, handwriting it.
Handwriting, yeah.
And interviewing. The assignment was interview, a grandparent about and make it into historical fiction. So I interviewed my grandfather and then turned it into historical fiction.
Awesome.
And I didn't really think at that time it was such a big deal, but then I remember my teacher reading it aloud and being so impressed at what I wrote. And I don't know why I always thought that it wasn't such a big deal, because I read it now and I'm like, wow, I wrote that when I was 10 years old? That is incredible.
Yeah.
I think it was because I just never thought that it was valuable.
Was it that assimilation mindset perhaps that was too pervasive in your life? Like you couldn't appreciate.
I think so.
Yeah.
I really think so. I couldn't appreciate the journey and the struggle that my own family went through to be here in the United States.
Yeah.
And, I think part of it, a friend of mine, Gabby Dei, she told me, I read that book, Grit. You said, you always a lot of immigrants, and her father is from Africa, a lot of immigrants have this sort of grit to them where they just feel like their struggle is not that important because, other people's struggles are not that important because they've struggled so much that it's just part of life.
Right.
And so I think that that's inherently in me, right? Like this sort of grit of minimizing my own struggle, minimizing other people's struggle because of what we've been through as immigrants,
right?
As brown immigrants,
right?
So and it's also very difficult for me to even accept that I'm Asian American. I'm darker than an Asian, than an East Asian, right? Like so Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and that is, like you said, colorism is really pervasive in the Philippines, and I'm sensitive to that. I relate more to South Asians, Indian American, South Asian Americans, and that, Cambodian Americans. Like there's more of the what Ali Wong says, jungle Asian. I'm a jungle Asian. I'm not a fancy Asian, And so that's always been also this sort of trying to figure out where I belong. And when I've always wanted to check off Pacific Islander and not Asian, because even in school, I'm considered Asian, and we've got the Asian families that are focused on math. I'm not that bad at math, but I'm not I'm not a math whiz. So, it's been that's been my struggle with accepting my history, and
The categories are so broad.
yes,
Right? And monolithic, and I feel like especially if they're others, some people want to keep them that way, and it's like, no, dig deep. There's like, I mean, even down to like the family level, people are different. There's differences,
Yes, absolutely.
So-
And also in my family, I'm pretty out there in terms of forging my own path.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my family members are nurses,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not a surprise. That is the main career that got the Filipinos to immigrate into the United States in the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it might have started in the 50s, but I'm not like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I've always loved more of the creative side of work. I can't really do anything outside if it's not creative.
Yeah.
I just won't do it. I think what really matters to me, and what matters to me with my ancestors, is their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about the Philippines. If we want to really talk about ancestors, let's talk about its history and its history.
Colonialism.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Spanish imperialism on top of, over 300 years.
Right. Do you have any memories of that first stint in LA when you said 5 or so?
Yeah.
What did you think? I mean,
I have a very cute picture that I can share with you.
okay.
I'm like in red, white, and blue dancing. I'm like 6 years old. It's like one of my favorite pictures of myself.
Okay.
Because I just remember that was like when I came to America, the United States.
Arrived.
Yeah. And it's just, I was like so cute.
And that would have been around 85, 86?
85,
okay.
86. Yeah,
Okay.
somewhere around there.
God, LA, if memory serves, had just had the Olympics in 84.
Yeah, well,
That whole thing.
I remember. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, or like a year later, there was a big earthquake in LA. I was there for that.
Okay.
Was that the 88 earthquake or 87?
I'm not from the LA one I'm familiar with is 94, and then 89 was here. But there
was one earlier than
probably
that.
in LA.
Oh yeah, because of 94. Yeah, I remember being taken out of school, and it was kind of crazy. But yeah, when I was, I was a happy kid, man. Like, we all lived in the same house in LA. Like, there were my grandparents were in one room. My one uncle is in another room with his wife, and then my other uncle, who's now here in San Francisco, he was in the other room, and then my aunts were. I mean, I think there was only 3 bedrooms. I don't know how many we fit.
Right.
So when I was in first grade, in LA, there was the teacher asked us to draw our bedrooms. And I didn't have my own bedroom.
Right.
So my family just told me to make a bedroom up, like a bedroom that I wanted.
Okay.
And so I did. But then I was also kind of crushed by it because I didn't have my own bedroom.
Because it wasn't real.
It wasn't real.
Right.
And I think that was really kind of unfair of the teacher to assume
It's totally
that
presumptuous.
I had my own bedroom. I mean, I think I would sleep in different bedrooms. Was wherever like I felt like sleeping, which was awesome. Like as
Were
a
you
kid.
the only kid there? Do you have siblings?
Well, I have half siblings.
Okay, got it.
But I'm the first of 17 grandchildren.
Okay.
So I'm like,
Cousins.
I'm kind of like the baby of my grandparents.
Okay.
Like the youngest of my grandparents, my Uncle Reggie, is 10 years older than I am.
Okay.
So I'm the youngest.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about your life in New Jersey?
Yeah.
How old were you when you went out there?
I was 8 in New Jersey.
Is that like 2nd, 3rd grade or something
Yeah.
like that? Okay.
Yeah. I was supposed to go to a magnet school in LA in like second grade, and I was really excited.
I haven't heard that term in so long.
In so long, right?
Yeah.
I was really excited because at that time I really loved science.
Okay.
And so I was supposed to go to a science magnet school in LA, and when I was told that I was going to move to New Jersey, I think that was a little bit of a sad thing.
Mm-hmm.
My thing was I immersed myself in school. I was a very good student.
Okay.
I was a very good student growing up.
Anything besides science that you were into in grade school?
Writing. I discovered that. I loved science, and I thought that that was something that I should pursue because of the culture of I loved a lot of the science projects. I love the scientific method, and then testing hypotheses, and then writing reports. And then eventually I realized, oh, I'm actually a writer, not a scientist.
Right.
But I approach a lot of what I see in a very scientific method. I've actually given a talk about like using the scientific method for deducing down, to the storytelling.
Right.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
I think that that's just my process. You just have an idea and a hypothesis, and then you go and like research and test and then you come up with your conclusion.
Love it.
Right? And so there's a science to storytelling that I really love. So really, one of the things that I did put myself through is at a young age, I think starting at fourth grade was really pivotal for me. We moved from Bloomfield, New Jersey to Mine Hill, New Jersey, a small town.
Okay.
And it had this amazing, it still has this Canfield Avenue School, which was this really pivotal 3 years of my life, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. My teachers were incredible, and there were so many resources like computers and like,
oh, wow. Yeah.
I was able to, I was typing like 60 words per minute and by middle school because of this school.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoyed, school and my teachers and learning, and then I started competing in public speaking competition. I was in a gifted and talented program, which they don't do anymore because they feel it's unfair. Right. I loved mine. I mean, I think that if I didn't have this gifted and talented program, I don't know how I would be.
You would have been held back.
Yeah.
Right.
I would have been bored maybe in school.
Right.
But the part of the gifted and talented program was bringing us through what they call forensics. It's like public speaking.
Okay.
It's weird. I don't know why it's called forensics.
That word gets thrown around.
Yeah. I'm like,
what
it's
does that
FBI
actually mean?
forensics. What does that mean? And I did a lot of public speaking. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it.
At that time, 4th, 5th grade?
Yeah, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Wow.
I won a couple of them.
No way.
Yeah, it was fun.
I'm imagining, and this is like a caricature, but like the little kid who like has the box and like sets it down and like stands up on the box is like, everybody.
Yes.
Were you like that kind of?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because my grandfather was an attorney in the Philippines. Then he became a security guard for 7-Eleven here in LA, but he was always an orator, and so was my mom too. So she encouraged this part, and so I learned like Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. When shall we be stronger? Shall it be the next week or the next year? Shall it be when every home has a British guard, like that kind of thing?
Oh my goodness.
Or like Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
Like what is that? Captain, my captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wreck. The prize we sought is won. I
didn't know we were going to get poetry in this episode.
Well, Annabelle Lee, Edgar Allan Poe, that was the other one. Yeah. I mean, that was also a pretty pivotal moment for me. I mean, this school was awesome.
It sounds like a well-rounded education, but also like I guess helping kids find a potential or find something that they really
it was incredible.
Grab onto. And
I love this school.
Yeah.
And I still have friends that from elementary school from these 3 years because it's just really changed their lives. I mean, if there's anything for me right now with WeXL, it's like I'm really excited about our youth program, and I want to bring it to San Francisco because we did it in the Bronx. Because I met a teacher from the Bronx, and we're like, oh, let's test it in your school first. But now I'm like, let's bring it to San Francisco because I just see how programs like this for kids shape them, 4th and 5th grade, and and specifically I remember because I was so moved or changed by this experience in 4th and 5th grade that I think we should be able to try to bring this to kids, especially kids in areas that don't have the programs, that don't have the funding to get it, and it's so different now.
Sadly, there's plenty of those here in San Francisco.
So, I went to a different
junior high.
High, middle school was pretty tough, even though I did like my teachers. I had a great science teacher, but I was in a predominantly black and Hispanic school, and they I got called chicken teriyaki. But I look back at it and I'm actually friends with all those people that call me chicken teriyaki now because it was middle school, you know. I'm still it was just middle school.
Kids start being shitty to each other.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the words they use are stuff they're hearing at home. It's not.
And it's just, and then now they're perfectly great humans, and they've even apologized to me, and I'm like, oh, we were 12,
right.
And I actually.
But I accept your apology.
I accept your apology. It was hurtful at one point,
right.
but kids are awful, to each other.
Totally.
And then so instead of going into Dover Public High School, I wanted to go to private school, but we didn't have a lot of money, so we went to this high school that has since closed down called Bailey Ellard.
Okay.
Quite loved Bailey Ellard, by the way. I did. My teachers were amazing, and it was only $350 a month. I remember, that is so cheap for a private school. No wonder it closed down.
Right. You're like, can I run your books for you?
Yes. Yeah. So I fell in love with going to high school. It was a very small high school. We were only 250 kids for 4 grades.
Oh, for the whole thing. Wow.
For the whole thing.
That's 60 or something
students
per. That's
it
tiny.
Was very tiny.
Yeah.
And, they even, I went to school in Madison, New Jersey, which is surrounded by prep schools galore.
Right.
Ivy
League prep schools.
Yes. You have Morristown Beard, where I really wanted to go, but it was at that time $15,000 a year. There's no way.
Yeah. It's a bit more than $350 a month.
Yes. A lot more. Maybe it was 10 back then.
Yeah.
But now it's 40. So, a lot more. And it just was not possible. But I was really lucky that I was able to go to Bailey Ellard affordably. And because it was so far, it was in Madison, it was far from where we lived.
Okay.
So I had to take the train.
Oh.
Which was actually quite wonderful.
I love it.
Yeah, that was a lot of independence, right? For
totally.
A 15-year-old.
Totally.
And
were you getting dropped off at the train station and it's see ya?
Don't want to be. That was great.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
How long was the train ride?
It was 40 minutes.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then and all of us kids it's so funny. I'm just recounting this. I'm like, this should be in one of my movies. Going into the train, because how cool is that?
Did you have a Walkman or a Discman and a magazines or books or anything? How did you pass the time?
I think I talked to my friends.
Okay. Oh, you had friends on the train.
Yeah,
right.
Because we would come from that area, or we would get picked up at Roxbury. Maybe there's along the line.
Yeah.
My friends start joining in.
Yeah.
I may have been at the end of the line.
Oh, you got everyone.
But I got books. I think I had a Discman at one point that kept on skipping because it didn't have a shock absorber.
Totally. I just kind of secretly just wanted to bring in Discman.
Right? I mean, I definitely did have it because I would always have like a sort of like a gadget.
Did you have the yellow one, the exercise one with the strap?
No,
like
it was
just the gray
Sony
one.
gray one,
Yeah,
Discman, and it's thin and it didn't have a shock absorber.
No.
Yeah, and so
Skip town.
But we had, I had like my BMG in Columbia House, and I did start actually working part-time on the weekends at a telemarketing firm.
Okay.
We're not selling anything. We're just here to ask you some questions. It's a survey. Do you have 15 minutes?
But again, just like 4th and 5th grade, you're using your voice.
Absolutely.
Boom.
Yes. And it was well paid at that time. It was slightly more than minimum wage. I think I was getting paid $7.50 an hour. I think minimum wage was like $5.25. So it was a lot of money.
And like the train, more independence too, right? If you start making your own money.
Yes. I may not have. I don't know when I actually started the part-time job, but I think I think it was before I started driving, because I think I would just get dropped off on the weekends, and I would work Saturdays and Sundays and sometimes Fridays. But yeah, I had, it was really interesting. I just immersed myself into school activities, every possible school activity you could think of, theater, like newspaper.
Oh, you did some newspaper.
Yeah,
okay.
and sports, really poorly I did in sports, but that's okay. I still did it.
Yeah.
I still played soccer and basketball. Oh my goodness, you should not put me on basketball team. But I did it, and I also, at that point, I was actually a pretty decent softball player growing up. And then when I went to high school and they were starting to pitch like 60-mile-an-hour balls at me, I was like, I'm not as good as I thought I was.
I have the same story. I loved baseball, and then it got to middle school, and I'm like, they throw hard, I'm out.
Yeah, right? And you kind of just realize, because you're playing with 18-year-olds and you're still a child.
Yeah, tiny.
And it was so scary, and I'm just I don't like getting hurt physically. So.
Same. Let's go back to the growing independence theme, because you went to college, and that's another step in the independence.
Wow.
So
it was so cool. Well, I was also valedictorian of
let's not forget
school.
that.
I just want to say that. I was pretty accomplished, but I remember one of my classmates saying, we were all friends, but we were just for me, I didn't really have a group in high school like I did in college, and we could talk about that next. But I remember one of my classmates' friends, she said, "Oh, girl, you're going to go crazy. You're going to become a party animal when you get to college." I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm such a good girl. Valedictorian. And sure enough, she was right.
Yeah.
I went to college, and I was like,
Rutgers.
Rutgers, are you rah-rah? It was off the hook.
It's kind of by Philly, right? Am I crazy? No. Rutgers?
There is one.
Okay.
So there's Rutgers Camden, but the main campus is Rutgers Newark. Rutgers Camden, Rutgers Newark, and then Rutgers New Brunswick is the main campus.
And that's where you were.
That's where I went.
New Brunswick.
College Avenue,
Okay.
Rutgers College. I mean, it's a big joke. No one really, everyone who went to Rutgers New Brunswick would say, "Oh, I'm at Rutgers College," because it's the harder college within the university, but it's really silly. Whatever, it's Rutgers University, which I think is an underrated school.
Okay.
It's
that's on the record here.
Yeah,
okay.
It's an underrated school. It's the most diverse school in the country.
Wow.
And I had great professors. I found it to be stimulating, but I also found its proximity to New York City and New Brunswick itself as a really cool dynamic where we're not in New York City, but we can take a train into New York City in 40 minutes or drive in 35.
Did you do that a lot? Did you go to spend a lot of time in New York?
Yeah, I started actually, a lot of time in New York.
Okay.
First, we spent a lot of time. I became part of the sororities at Rutgers. I got into Panhellenic council, which is the governing council. I was president of the Pan-Hellenic, so I was always involved.
Almost like student government, or
not student government. It's the sororities. It's the government of the sororities.
Pan-Hellenic.
Pan-Hellenic,
like
yeah.
the Greeks. Oh,
exactly.
Got it.
So the men's side is the fraternity side is the intra-fraternity council, and then the women's side is Pan-Hellenic.
Okay.
So that was an interesting thing because this is part of the assimilating. I really wanted an American college experience, so I joined a sorority. But there were so many things to do at Rutgers that it was really like I was kind of spread thin.
Okay.
And then I had a really great social life. So I did go to New York City when I turned 21. But around that time too, I started promoting Coors Light. I was a spokesmodel for Coors Light at 21.
Okay.
And it was the best job. It was, and at that time, it was early on in when they just figured out promotions were a thing to sell beer. And this is important why I'm talking about Coors Light, because it leads to my finding my partner for life, my husband. But Coors Light really put me through college.
Oh, wow.
And got me laid. And got me married. I was kidding.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Coors Light.
Yeah. And we were getting paid $125 an hour per promo. Well, $125 per promo. So a promo would be an hour and a half. We'd go around in the bars. So I'd get paid to go to the bars to hand out T-shirts. And then in the summertime, the New Jersey shore opened up.
Yeah.
And so we would get promotions in the New Jersey shore, and they would pay us a double if we changed bars, or something like if we worked more than 2.5 or 3 hours, it was great. It was a double or something. So
Amazing.
And so if we went to 2 different bars on a weekend, we'd get paid $350.
Wow.
There was a point when we had a quadruple, and it was $700.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I broke it down, but the amount of hours that I had worked was not 7 hours.
Right.
I mean, they ended up catching on to it. We're paying these women way too much money. But I mean, I was
until they did.
Incredibly happy with myself that I got that job. Yeah. And it was so fun. And then, it would let me, and then on the, one of my friends, she's one of my best friends. She was in my wedding party. She was a designated driver all the time. And she's like, let's go into the city. Let's go. I'll drive. And I'm like, okay. So we started going to China Club, my girl group, there's 4 of us. We started going to China Club on Monday nights, Suede on Tuesday nights, and Suede was a really fun, small little lounge club in Chelsea. China Club is more like meatpacking, Midtown area. Then we graduated to Suede, which was a little bit more shishi, and that's where we met a bunch of really impressive people and would see, celebrities all the time. And
Did you dig it? Did you dig the big city-ness of New York? Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah. And I loved my girlfriends. They were just so, they're so beautiful and confident, and none of us would have to worry about each other. If they're outside, we could get into the club. It was it was I will never give that time up for my, that was a real big deal for me as a woman. It was my coming out, hello world, I am woman, hear me roar. When I was in New York City.
Did you ever think you might end up there?
Oh, 100%. I tried.
Yeah. Okay.
I moved into New York City before leaving for the East Coast for California.
Okay. That must have been after 9/11.
That was way after 9/11. 9/11 happened while I was still in college.
Right.
And I had an internship at RNN, Regional News Network. And I was on the train, and I saw the first plane hit the tower from where we had stopped in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, what's
you
going
saw
on?
it with your eyes, no TV.
With eyes.
Just through your window. Or
through the train window.
Yeah, Jesus.
And then we thought it was a prop plane. We didn't realize that it was a big...
Because it doesn't make sense.
You can't see it.
It doesn't make sense for a jet airliner to fucking...
You can't see it.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's just like, what's going on? Went into my internship, and as I walked, it was like a movie. Like, people were just standing under... I remember this. I passed a deli, and the deli owner was standing there just under the speaker listening to what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And people were almost like moving slow
mm-hmm.
or standing still. And
mm-hmm.
I'm walking through trying to get to this building, which was on Madison and 22nd Street. And it was actually the Google building. Google was in that building, and I was like, oh, Google has enough money to have a New York City office. That was how early this was. This was 2000.
Right.
2001, right?
Right.
So when I went into the office that day, we watched all. I mean, we were close. I mean, we're downtown, close to downtown. Yeah, mm-hmm. We saw everything come down on the TV now, and I was just like, it was weird. It was, and then by the time I got out, I actually got out okay, like 5 o'clock. Finished my internship. I got out, and it was just still kind of, what's going on? Everything was quiet in New York, except for like ambulances and cop cars speeding up and down the street. And then they were
Did the rubble hit that far up?
No.
Okay, it went east, I feel like.
Yeah, but when I went into the train station, I was really impressed that they just wanted to get people out of the city.
Right.
And I remember sitting on the train and looking at this woman just sitting there quietly covered in ash. She was gray, and she was just sitting there, and I don't even remember if people were crying, but it was like, I was not processing anything.
Right.
It wasn't until the next day that it hit me, and mm-hmm. I just bawled my eyes out. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I had to, I took the train back to New Brunswick that day.
Okay.
I mean, I did my internship 9 to 5. And probably one of the things that, looking back now, I feel like I probably should have stuck with that internship. But one, it was unpaid. Mm. But instead, I found another internship nearby, News 12, New Jersey.
Okay. That
got me more of the local, and so I could stay local and not go into the city.
Right.
And I think that one might have been paid. I'm not sure, but it was like a really, like, I wonder about that. I'm like, I wonder if I should have stayed in the city and done the stories in the city at that time. But you just never know.
Yeah, and you didn't.
And I didn't.
So let's get you to the other big city on the other side of the country. What's that story? So after college, during college, I got this really cool part-time job working for a newspaper, Gannett newspaper, I think I told you, and I loved it. And 2 days a week I would be an obituary clerk. 1 day a week I would go down and go do stories. I mean, I even did a story, like I was like a investigative reporter, like undercover as a student, because I'm still a student. And I went, and I was supposed to talk to this couple that whose roommate filmed them with a webcam having sex or something.
Yeah, and I actually found the couple, but we took the same elevator, and I was like, do you two know this so-and-so? And they're like, that's us. Oh, can I interview you for this story?
Oh, wow.
It was so cool. Yeah. And then I got to follow, it was like, what was it? Almost Famous, where I got to follow a local ska band down in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. And that was like a newspaper assignment for me.
Wow.
It was so cool. I always think about all the movies now, now that we don't have proper journalists anymore, right. How are we ever gonna, tell these stories?
Right.
Because this was amazing.
Yeah.
So I actually made a bad decision to take a full-time job with a weekly newspaper instead of stick it out even part-time at the daily newspaper.
Okay.
These are now a bunch of lost, wandering ways of mine. Mm-hmm. So I took a job at a weekly newspaper. It was just not my jam.
Still in New Jersey?
Still in New Jersey.
Okay.
It was not my jam.
Okay.
It was, covering like Somerville's, what do you call that? Like, local hearings and something like that.
Oh, like City Hall, City Council?
City Council.
Oh,
City
man.
Council. I'd be there for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I would write like 1 inch. And I'm like, there's must be a much better use of my time than doing that.
That was Arabella DeLucco. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, hear the conclusion of Arabella's life history. Part 2 drops Thursday wherever you listen to podcasts. Music for the podcast was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Original photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 4th season, we have more than 180 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can, please rate and review the show so we can reach even more folks. We love email, and we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.